eventually. I'm your host, Helena, and this is my co-host, Rio. Today we're going to talk about Chronicles of Darkness with our superb storyteller. How are you doing today, Rio?
I'm doing all right. We're at Coulter's house, so I get to hang out with Cooper, who's trying to escape me right now, which he shouldn't do.
We could tell the viewers that he was just like so happy and sleeping a moment ago.
Mm-hmm. And then we turn the cameras on, and now he's like all... Like,
it sounds like we're lying when we say that, but we're not.
But yeah, no, like it's been like a day. We've already been here for like an hour and a half trying to like set up all the lights and everything. So yeah.
I really like not being responsible for all the technical stuff.
No, I mean, we have to we don't talk about it enough on the live play games, but like Coulter does way too much stuff for us, and we're all idiots who don't know how to do any of that stuff. So it's very handy that we have him. And he's also in the other room, so we have to say nice things.
Yeah, he's like has a gun on us, so but we're safe.
Yeah, it's one of his husband's guns. He does not believe in guns himself. So
should we not have brought up guns?
I don't know.
I hope we didn't make anyone uncomfortable.
I mean, we are talking about Chronicles of Darkness, so guns are inherent. Like unlike D&D, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of guns. Not in my game, obviously, but in so many other.
It has the potential for there to be guns. All
There's
right.
Like a whole page on guns.
Good, at least. There should be at least one. Yeah. So that leads us to, what is the general tone of Chronicles of Darkness?
Well, so Chronicles of Darkness, unlike the puppies playing, Chronicles of Darkness, unlike your Dungeons & Dragons, your Starfinder, which are the other games that we, play in, is more of... I don't want to say gritty, because gritty is like the word that everybody uses for it, but it's set in modern times, first and foremost. So it's very recognizable to our own world. Like it's very easy to set it in different time periods because we already have knowledge of what the technology would be in that time period, and like the very fact that you have like a cell phone in Chronicles of Darkness like changes gameplay so much. Because like when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, like, oh, we need to talk to the wizard, and like, how do you talk to the wizard? You have to have a magic orb, and all this stuff, and you can just call them, And the other side of it is like, you're pretty fragile. Should we cut? Where was I?
So you were saying the other side of the coin, like there
was... Oh, it's you're pretty fragile. You know what I mean? Like if you get shot with a gun in the game, there's a very real possibility one shot could kill you. You know what I mean? So like it's less being a hero and more existing in this world that has monsters and has, other things. Most of the characters will have jobs and apartments and like family members. So it's a little bit more on like the slice of life side of things than the let's go on an adventure side of things,
Do you feel like it is darker in terms of the stuff that happens and the monsters? Like, not that D&D is kiddie by any means, but...
Well, so as a general rule, like when we're talking about baseline Chronicles of Darkness without adding on to any of the templates like werewolf or vampire or anything like that.
Okay.
Like when we're talking just normal humans, it is very, very dark in the fact that the creatures you're fighting are stronger than you, harder to kill than you, do more damage than you do. So unlike D&D where you're, especially with 5th edition, where you're basically indestructible unless the DM tries to kill you, you know what I mean? Like it as a storyteller for World of Darkness, you have to be careful not to kill anybody. You know what I mean? Because it's incredibly simple to do it. You know what I mean? So in that sense, it is very dark. It takes a long time to heal. Go figure.
Yeah, it does.
You know what I mean? Like one...
Unless you're a werewolf.
Well, again, not talking about the templates yet. But, like...
Right, we're humans.
Yeah, we're humans right now. We're humans. But, like, if you get shot, like, your character could be laid up for weeks. You know what I mean? And so... it is darker in that sense, and also the monsters are preying on humanity. It's not like D&D where like you live in a town and it's all fine and dandy, and then you leave town and are attacked by a dragon. You know what I mean? The vampire could be your character's boss. You know what I mean? Or so it's a little bit darker in that way. Yeah.
Is it tough to balance that darkness with still trying to have fun and have a game?
I mean, I never have problem adding humor to my games, but I feel like as a World of Darkness storyteller, I probably add too much humor at the same time, you know? So, like, I know for me, humor is a huge part of it because, like, it breaks up, it makes the scary bits scarier when there's a little levity. But when it comes down to the base system, yeah, I feel like there isn't a lot of inherent humor in it. It's very serious, takes a very serious tone. If you ever watch like a vampire game, like where it's just straight vampires, which we have like kind of left out of our game because it is so popular and it is so politics and backstabbing and betrayal and like serious tones. Whereas like our games, like with the Hunter game, it was a very serious tone, but all the characters had like humorous moments. Shout out to the locked door in Circle K. If you've seen that episode.
That's a good one. Okay, so are there any core themes that you will see over varied Chronicles of Darkness games?
I mean, I feel like Chronicles of Darkness follows like the basic storytelling antagonistic kind of rules, like man versus self, man versus, I think it's God? I should have researched this before using this answer, but you know, like it's very much so you against something else, even if it is just yourself, because
you against evil.
Well, but see, evil is so transitory in World of Darkness because, like, when you're playing a human, vampire is obviously evil. When you're playing a vampire, like the scale is different, and
sure.
Like. We can talk about it later in the video, but like, you know, the morality system inherent in World of Darkness changes based on who you are. So like, for example, a changeling, they don't really care about what the actions they take. They don't, like, there's really no good or evil. It's just all about maintaining your clarity and your place in the world. Whereas for a human, shooting someone, even in self-defense, could vastly affect that character's moral and sanity. You know what I mean? So like, it's really on the perspective of the player and the kind of game you're doing. Yeah. So.
Okay. So you've got a new story that you're going to start. Where do you build first? The setting, the villain, your character dynamics?
Well, for me personally, the first thing I go for is like, what kind of story do I want to tell? You know what I mean? So for like Hunter, I wanted to tell a story of like a group of people out doing adventures, and kind of like, because we originally were doing D&D, World of Darkness, which is now Chronicles of Darkness, and Starfinder. So I wanted to kind of keep it in that same vein of like a group of heroes fighting against evil, and that's why I set you guys all up as humans. And then very quickly I learned that it's just not as fun.
What are we gonna do?
Yeah, you know, like, because no one has any powers, and the powers they have aren't very useful. And like the Hunter game that we were using, like, is great, fantastic, beautiful game, but not balanced as far as the powers, because like you never used your powers, hardly ever, you know. And then like Coulter, like, had these beautiful powers that were so situational, and then there was Hank, who used his powers like every 5 minutes, you know what I mean, because they were so strong.
Good point.
You know what I mean? So that's why I wanted to move into doing the zoo game, which is what it's called when you have multiple different types of creatures all in one group, is because it brings that cool factor to each character.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't think I answered your question, but
I mean, you gave me an answer.
But really, I would decide, when you're doing World of Darkness, I would decide what the antagonist is. Like, are you going to do a character-focused story where it's dealing with their personal demons? Are you going to do an external force that they're all against? Are you going to do multiple external forces? Are you going to do slice of life? Because the joy of Chronicles of Darkness, for me, is you can really do anything in it. Sure. Like, I don't know if you remember, but for my birthday one year, we did a game where each person was in charge of their own storyline. We literally made World of Darkness characters of ourselves, and then it was kind of like a haunted house where every time we would enter into a new room, the next person would take over as storyteller and tell their little personal story. and it was beautiful and fun, and there was no powers or anything, but like it's a system that if you want to play in the real world, it's simple, it's easy, the rules are really, easy to grasp very quickly, unlike say something like Dungeons and Dragons or Starfinder, where you have to like learn, okay, well, how does magic work? How does that work? You don't need to use those rules if you don't want to.
Yeah, that was a great game. I stole shamelessly from Neil Gaiman. But,
don't we all steal shamelessly from Neil Gaiman?
Okay, so Chronicles of Darkness as a system, what's kind of the history there? Who created it?
Well, so I had notes on all of this that I did not bring with me today, but I know the basics of it. So White Wolf was the original people who published it, and that was back, I want to say, in the 90s, because I remember playing their games in 1997 for sure. So I know it existed in 1997, and I should have a better history here, and maybe our editor will just correct me after the fact.
He'll just blank out your voice and put the text at the bottom. Sure.
But it was White Wolf Games. They were moderately successful. They had the core book, and then they had the template books like Mage, Werewolf, stuff like that. And then very recently, that company went down, and they were bought out by the Onyx Path, which is another publisher. And Onyx Path put out the second edition, or New World of Darkness, as it was called. NWOD was the acronym.
Oh no!
And then since then,
they changed that.
Yeah. And then since then, they've come out with the second edition, New World of Darkness, which is Chronicles of Darkness. And that's what we're currently playing. And the name change kind of helps to differentiate it. Unlike D&D, where it's like D&D first edition, V second edition, they weren't as clear with that. But they're basically doing all of their stuff through Kickstarter. So if Chronicles of Darkness is something you enjoy, I would highly suggest following their Kickstarters and donating their Kickstarters, because they put out beautiful books that are so well written. And unlike in previous editions, this most recent one, if you buy the Werewolf book, it comes with the base book in it. So you don't have to buy the Chronicles of Darkness book and the Werewolf book. Oh,
that's nice.
Yeah, you can just have the Werewolf book, and it has all the information you need, unlike their previous where you had to have at least 2 books to play a werewolf. So, but I can't say it enough. Look up Chronicles, Onyx Path's Kickstarters. I think they're just starting their Hunter Kickstarter now, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I know you nerds are no stranger to money, but definitely put your money where your mouth is and support these people. Yeah, support us. Hey.
Don't buy that 15th set of metal dice. Give us $5.
Okay. All right. So technically speaking, what dice do you need? What kind of dice?
Well, our set designer very nicely put out here. You only need D10s. It's a D10 system, so you use everything D10s. I mean, that being said, it's D10s. Do you want me to go into how the D10s work?
Yeah.
Okay. So on your character sheet, when you're going through it, you'll have words for the thing that it is representing, and then you'll have these like empty bubbles, kind of like a multiple choice test, like a standardized test. And then when you're creating your character, you fill in these bubbles, so you might have a strength with 3 bubbles next to it, or a combat with 2 bubbles next to it,
or dots.
They're more oftenly called dots. Thank you. I should have used the right vernacular. But anyway, so you have those dots, and then those dots represent how many dice you roll. So if you have 3 dots here, 2 dots there, and you put those 2 together, you get 5 dots. And then unlike more traditional D20 systems where the modifiers are just straight numbers like +5 to that or blah, 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 the modifiers add additional dice, and then you roll your dice, and for every 8, 9, or 10 you get, it's considered a success. Most actions require just 1 success to succeed. If you get 5 successes, it's an exceptional success, which would be like a crit in like a D20 system. That being said, you can also, if you roll a 10, you get to roll it again to see if you get an additional success. And so it's both more complicated and less complicated, because like obviously with the D20 system, you're just rolling 1 dice, the D20, and then figuring out from there. But at the same time, as from a storyteller's perspective, I find it very simple to just make up dice pools as I go. Like, I want to do this. Strength, that. So.
I feel like it's complex enough to where you can do that, where you can make calls like that. Because certainly the book will give you, like, okay, if your character wants to do this, roll this plus this. But there's not going to be a guide for every single situation. So
yeah, the book has very complex rules on a lot of things, and they're very handy, but at the same time, like, because the system can be so simple, it can be very tempting to just be simple with it.
Okay, so what kind of roles are we doing?
Well, give me an example of what you want to do.
So if you're going up against a foe, are you still rolling to see if you make your attack? Are you still rolling defensively when they're attacking you?
So that's kind of a two-part question. You know what I mean? So when you're rolling against them, you'll take, let's say you're using a gun, because we were talking about guns earlier and the gun being held on us currently. So you want to shoot a gun. So you're going to take your dex, which is one of your attributes, and then you're going to add it to one of your skills in firearms. That'll give you a dice pool, right? Now, it gets more complicated depending on, like, range. Is it raining? All of these things could add pluses or minus to that dice pool. But once you figure that out, it's not the greatest example because of defense. But anyway, so you roll those dice, and if you get at least one success, you hit, and then the gun has damage on it, which would then add to the amount of damage you dealt. And then with combat's not the best example because it's, like, a pretty complicated, but, like, let's say you want to, like, pick up a chair, right? And it's a really, really super heavy chair. Like, it's a chair made out of a white dwarf or something. You would roll strength and then maybe athletics or strength and stamina, like, to see if you can hold it up long enough to do what you're wanting to do. And then again, usually you just need one success.
Okay. So attributes, you mentioned those.
Yeah.
What are those?
So the attribute systems should be familiar to anyone who's played a tabletop before. I mean, you have your strength, you got your dex, you got your con, and all of those things. The only difference being in this system is it's split into 3 categories. You have your mental attributes, you have your physical attributes, and then you have your social attributes, right? Because the way the game treats situations is, like, most mental skills are almost like mental combat. Most social skills are almost like social combat, because when you're having a conversation, like, they're countering your roles with these and blah, blah, blah. But the system also further breaks it down into 3 side categories. You have your power, you have your finesse, and you have your resistance. And so those further help you encapsulate the thought process. So the most easiest to understand is physical. So with physical, your power stat in physical is going to be your strength, which is how strong you are. Can you pick stuff up? Can you throw things super far? That's just your raw power using your muscles. And then your finesse is going to be your dexterity. Like, how much fine motor control do you have? Like, aiming things, like fiddling around inside of, like, a bomb. Can you keep your hands steady? Those would all be dexterity things because it's your finesse. And then resistance represents your ability to resist physical things. So stamina is used. So, like, running long distances, you would need to keep up your stamina. Resisting poison, stuff like that, you would use stamina. And then those same things are translated over into the others, where mental power is your intelligence, your ability to, your actual ability to process information. Your finesse is wits, which is your ability to, like, think of fine details, think on your feet. Perception is based on wits, so noticing fine details and stuff like that. And then your resistance is your resolve. So same with stamina, but now apply it to mental tasks. So you're cramming for a test that you have in the morning and you want to stay up all night. You're going to have to roll resolve to make sure you stay mentally aware enough to, keep into it. So that would be resolve. And then you move over to the social skills. Your power social skill is obviously charisma. I'm sorry. It's presence.
The equivalent of charisma.
Yeah. It's just a synonym. But it's your presence. It's your ability to just walk into a room, be beautiful, be charming without really trying. And then you have your finesse is going to be your manipulation, which is your literal ability to manipulate others, like get through small social minutia. And then obviously composure, which when somebody like brings up your baby daddy in front of the king of Burundi, you know what I mean? Like you have to keep your composure, you know. So
I think the king is open.
Yeah,
about
probably.
baby
I mean,
daddies.
I don't want to say anything about the king of Burundi because I don't know him personally.
Sure.
So.
I only know him casually, but you're right.
You guys are Instagram friends, right?
Exactly, which amounts to nothing these days. Sadly. Okay.
But follow our Instagram.
We'll be your friend.
Please, we desperately will.
Okay. So skills then, that's something that you do see in D&D. So attributes are kind of like your stats in D&D, but it seems like there's a lot more nuance in Chronicles. And then skills, we have skills too. So how do those look?
So I should mention, which I didn't mention when we were talking about attributes, is all of these things are rated 1 to 5. So 1 dot to 5 dots. Yeah. So with your attributes, you're always guaranteed at least 1 dot in each, and then you build from there as you're building your character. Whereas with skills, you can have potentially no dots in a skill. You know, so unlike D&D, where your skill is, I mean, if we go by 5th edition, I mean, D&D has done skills many different ways throughout the years. But if we go on D&D standards, you have proficiency, you know, which is a flat number, plus your ability modifier, which is a flat number, which you get from your strength, and then that tells you what your skill roll is. In World of Darkness, skills are more like you can have a roll that doesn't involve a skill. Like the chair example I gave earlier, that was strength and stamina. No skill is really necessary to pick up a chair. But when you're interacting with the world, skills are...
Like if you're trying to do it stealthily.
Yeah.
Like, trying to pick up this chair and steal it.
In that case, you would probably do strength plus stealth.
Okay.
And that's actually a really good example because like it's very, very... it's very easy to get caught in the tabletop thing of like, well, stealth is dex skill. You know what I mean? So like if you're rolling stealth, you should also be always wearing dexterity, which isn't necessarily the case with World of Darkness. Because in the perfect example of stealing the chair, you know, you want to do it stealthily. Well, dex doesn't really come into it because you have to pick up this thing and somehow get it out of the house quietly.
Sure.
You know? So where attributes are what you have... You know what I mean? Like you're just born with it, or like you have natural muscle, or you've worked on your muscles or anything. It's like your capabilities. Skills are things you have learned how to do. So like a great example I tell all people when they're creating characters, you can have a character that's really bad at dex or strength, for example. Like let's say you want to create that like Bruce Lee character who's not super strong, but is like a whiz with hand-to-hand combat. Well, you can have a low strength, but a really high brawl skill, which is hand-to-hand combat. And then that will give you the same dice pool as somebody who split the difference between those two skills. You know what I mean? So skills are a way to make up for, through rigorous training and like natural talent, to make up for something that maybe you're weak in another area. So like a lot of people get wrapped up as like, oh, I want to use a sword, so that means I have to put all my dots in strength. Not necessarily, because if you put a bunch of dots in weaponry, you have those dots. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm saying a bunch of words you don't know. And I don't want to list every skill. If you're interested in it, we'll probably have... I'm going to look to Coulter for confirmation. We'll probably have a video eventually where we talk about like the specifics of all the skills and stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. So I don't have to go into all the skills. But they are broken down into mental skills, physical skills, and social skills, just like attributes.
Again, those.
And that's kind of just a handy way, a handy shorthand of letting you know, like, okay, so like I'm trying to lie to someone, so it's probably going to be a social attribute that I'm using.
Sure.
You know, and that being said, like if you have no skills in something, it doesn't bar you from using that task. It's just you get a penalty. So if you have no dots in a skill and you're trying to use it, mental skills, you get a -3 to your dice pool. So if you're like trying to remember the king of Burundi's last name, you would roll politics plus your intelligence modifier. Not intelligence modifier, your intelligence dots. But if you don't have politics, you would then subtract those 3 dice from your intelligence roll, so you might end up with a very low roll. That being said, physical and social are only a -1 unskilled penalty, but yeah. So like,
but
skills,
1 dice, that's 1 or 2. If you only have 1 or 2 intelligence dots, that's going to clear you out.
Well, and that would bring you down to a chance die, which we haven't discussed yet,
right.
But should we discuss it? Should we?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I mean, I guess if you want to.
No, it's fine. If it's on the list, we'll get to it. We're very professional.
So, skill specialties, how does that get even more detailed?
So, skill specialties are kind of like, let's say you're that hatchet man, you know what I mean, who, you know, like, kills people for money, and you're real dark and gritty, and, you know, but, you know, so you would have to be well-versed in firearms in order to be that, like, gritty hatchet man sniper, right? But you also want to specialize in something. Right, so you take a specialty in sniper rifles with your firearm skill that adds an extra dice whenever you use a sniper rifle with the firearm skill. I love your talk show host drink. It is so perfect. But yeah, so it's just a way of getting like a little bit of an extra boost when you do specific things within a skill, because you might like only have like 1 dot in academics but know everything about World War II. You know what I mean? So like that would be a specialty in academics for World War II. You know, so your dice pool is just a little bit bigger when dealing with that, and you can buy specialties for just about everything. You know, like it's really open to interpretation.
Yeah, I love how customizable that really makes your character. Okay, so merits. What are those?
So merits are basically things that are strange or unique about your character that aren't really covered under strength. Like the first one that comes to mind is like the giant merit, right? So you get some dots in giant, and it means that you are just physically huge, right? Where like the average person is like 6 foot, your average height is now 7 foot. And then like you buy that giant merit, and in the merit it explains how it changes the rules for everything else. You know what I mean? A good one that we've seen used on this in season 2 is Mark's common sense merit, right? It's just a special little ability that he has where he can basically ask me, the storyteller, like, what's going on? What should we be doing? You know what I mean? Like, and
then the other characters can come in and just mess all of that up.
Yeah, very clearly. I mean, like, what's your favorite merit from Ruby?
We haven't done our pack ritual yet, but once we do, I will then be able to know where all my pack members are and sense their general well-being.
But see, that's a power, not a merit.
No, it's a merit.
Is it a merit for you?
Yes.
I thought that was one of your gifts. Oh, wow. Well, teach me something.
No, it's like, it's even more, I think it's because it's you can you specifically know where they are.
But that's a werewolf specific merit.
How do I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna fight with you about it.
Oh, I was talking about like resources. Like,
I'm sure we'll look it up after. And I'll be wrong because I'm usually wrong.
But like, I was thinking you were gonna say your resources dots because they represent how rich Ruby is. You know what I mean?
That counts as a merit though? They're just, I thought they were resource dots, but I guess resources is your merit.
Resources is a merit that you can put dots into.
Sure.
Because all merits either have a flat cost of like 2-3 dots, or they can go 1 to 5 or something like that. So merits are ways of further customizing the character. And I don't know about other people who create characters, but I always find myself wanting more merit dots than anything else because they really let you figure out who the person is.
Okay, right on.
Like for Coulter's character, like he has the 2 human characters, and like the main difference between the 2 of them is the different merits that they have. You know what I mean?
How do you get these merits?
So at character creation, I might be wrong on this, but for Chronicles of Darkness normal human characters, you get 5 merit dots to spend across all of the things. And again, lo and behold, they're broken down into mental, physical, and social merits.
Consistency.
And then you can also use experience points to purchase them. And for the supernatural creatures, the templated creatures like the werewolf, your vampire, they get 10 dots at character creation because they have a larger pool of merits to pull from.
Okay, so I know our fragile human mortal bodies in Chronicles of Darkness are so weak, but do they grow in power as you gain experience? Are there levels?
So that's a really complex question, because depending on how you decide to play it, there's levels, but there also isn't. You know what I mean? So how it works is a character creation, you get a certain amount of dots to put in all the different categories. Like a certain number of dots to put into attributes, a certain number of dots to put into skills, a certain number of dots to put into merits. And that's kind of like where you start out. Now, where you grow is through beats and experience points. And this is why there's really no levels in World of Darkness, because you choose what you improve as you play, right? So as you play, I know I've spoken on camera of like, take a beat, get a beat. So each one of these beats, they usually are rewarded for things that help people grow, like failure or, you know, stuff like that. Overcoming things like your conditions, reaching goals, which are the aspirations that we talk about mostly off camera. But, you know, so you gain these beats, and for every 5 beats you gain, you get 1 experience point. And then you can spend that experience point on different things on your character sheet, and the cost is different for everything. So like attributes, off the top of my head, are 5 experience points per dot. Skills are 3 experience points per dot, and so on and so forth.
It used to be really expensive.
Well, so the old system, which I don't know if we want to confuse the matter, but
I just you don't have to go into it, but I just like remembering it was a lot more.
Yeah, they really simplified it, but they still, you get the same level of growth because you have to earn 5 things in order to get 1 experience point.
Yeah.
So like it's still kind of around the same cost. They've just made it simpler to get to the high levels, whereas before it was like exponentially expensive.
Okay. So there's individual experience that you're earning, and then your group also earns experience, right? How does that look? You have group XP and individual.
Well, so there's
group.
2. So the confusion there is there's 2 different ways of awarding beats. So you have beats that are, so you can either award beats individually to the player, or what you can do is every time somebody earns a beat, you can put it into a pool that then is split up at the end. And that optional rule is there for, like, let's say there's one character who's like really hitting his aspirations and really hitting like failing all these roles and stuff. He would grow so much faster than a character who maybe isn't paying as close attention to the flow of the story. And so it keeps everyone on an even level. Who
decides if the beat goes into group or into individual? The storyteller?
You pick one or the other system. So like we personally don't use group beats.
Okay. We did with the first chapter.
Well, so that's where it gets confusing, because that was technically not Chronicles of Darkness.
Okay.
So in Hunter, there was also what's called practical experience, which is a system that was specific to Hunter.
Okay.
So I understand the confusion there, and like it's good that you bring it up, because the viewers might also be confused, because if you've watched Hunter, you've probably also watched the new videos, that season 2. So in season 1, yes, we did have practical experience that you guys spent as a group, but that was a Hunter-specific mechanic.
That's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. So do you prefer awarding the individual beats, or do you want...
I asked the group, and they said they wanted their own beats. I think I would probably prefer group beats, because then no one is really left behind. Sure. And if like I forget somebody's, like me as a storyteller, if like I forget to steer the story towards your aspiration, you know what I mean? Like it's more rewarding that everyone grow together, and also is easier to monitor who's growing faster than somebody else that way. So personally, I would probably rather do group beats, but we are currently doing single individual.
Okay. Okay, and then another big thing we're dealing with, willpower. What is that?
So willpower is kind of like it's a secondary characteristic, much like your health or something else, where it's a combination of other things. So your willpower pool is determined by your your resolve plus your composure stats. So your mental stability and your social stability, which creates a pool of dots called willpower. Now, if you're looking at a character sheet right now, or you've seen the character sheet, underneath those dots, there's boxes, right? And so you start out with a certain amount of willpower, and willpower can be used in the moment to make a roll better. Like, so if you have like 1 or 2 dice that you're rolling, you can spend a willpower point, add 3 to that dice pool, and now have a better chance of succeeding. Or, and we don't really do this in the show, you can spend willpower reflexively to increase any of your defense stats. So your resolve, your stamina, your composure, or your actual defense. So
we should use it more.
Yeah,
because that's a good thing to do.
I remind you guys several times, and they all.
Oh no, he's got a gun. I reflexively will be using all my willpower.
Well, but see, that being said, you can only spend 1 willpower per turn.
I reflexively use the one that I can use this turn.
But yeah, you know what I mean. So willpower is and for humans specifically, like Psychic Jack, before we found out stuff that we might spoil for other people, but like when he was using his telekinesis, like humans, he would use his willpower, so he was tanking his willpower constantly trying to make these effects happen. And so for like normal humans, willpower is all they got. You know, they got to spend their willpower. When you get into the supernatural templates, you get new systems that like kind of branch away from that, but willpower is basically your will to like you like forcing through it. It's like that scene in the movie like Die Hard where Bruce Willis just ran across some glass and he's tired as hell, but he's got to jump out a window and shoot a guy. You know, he doubles down, spends a willpower, and he gets out there and he does it. You know,
it seems like willpower would be a good thing to use when you have a chance die. What's that?
Is this where we're talking about chance die?
Well, actually, maybe I thought you would talk about it during the dice section. But here's where I'm putting it now.
All right. So chance die are anytime negatives or penalties would reduce you to less than 1 die, you always get 1 dice. Right? And so if you have 1 dice and you succeed, it's just a normal success. It can still do 10 again, where you reroll 10s. I mean, I think I've had a character actually critically succeed on a chance die before, which is insane. You know, but so it is possible to success. But if you don't succeed on a chance die, instead of being a normal failure, it becomes a critical failure.
Dun, dun, dun. Which
is like rolling a 1 in most people's D&D games, where something terrible happens or it goes awry. And when you're reading through the books, almost every kind of like dice roll they'll give you 1 effect for exceptional success, 1 effect for a success, 1 for a failure, and then 1 for a critical failure. You know what I mean? So like those are the 4 levels of success inherent in the Chronicles of Darkness system. But the only way to critically fail is to get a chance die and fail at it, or if you're going for beats, anytime you fail, you can also choose to critically fail.
Okay. So I'm trying to steal this really heavy chair stealthily,
the
right?
Only example we're going to use for this whole video.
Critical failure looks like what for that? Just me trying to steal a chair.
So like normal failure, you might bump into a wall.
Oops.
You know, and like it makes a sound and people are alerted to it. Critical failure might be you bump into a wall, fall backwards, the chair falls on you, being super heavy, deals a little bit of damage, and now when the bad guys run in to stop you from stealing their chair, you're now pinned under a heavy chair.
Right.
You know, so that might be the difference between like failure, which is like, and again, we're talking about the strength plus dexterity roll to move the super heavy chair to steal it from the bad guys. So normal failure would just mean the bad guys know you're there, where critical failure is now you're hindered in some way.
Okay. What does an exceptional success look like?
An exceptional success would be not only do you get that chair out of the bad guy's place, but inside the cushions there might be like some stashed like $1,000 bills or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it really depends on the task. And in the example we're using, success would be you get out, whereas exceptional success is you get out and nobody even ever knew you were there. You know what I mean? Like maybe they don't
even recognize the chair's missing.
Yeah, they might not recognize the chair is missing for like a couple of days. You know, like they keep walking through the living room going like, what is different about this room? And then one day one goes, hey, what happened to our super heavy chair?
You've had the time maybe to artfully paint a chair on the wall and it like has 3-dimensional. And so for a while they thought the chair was there, but...
and this is why we don't let players decide what happens.
That's a lot of work. All right, so finally, virtues and vices. why do characters have to have those, and what do those look like?
So I'm only going to speak on Chronicles of Darkness because virtue and vice is one of the things, like the base game, just normal humans, because that's one of the things that drastically changes when you get into the templates and like your werewolves and stuff like that. But from a normal human level, intro to Chronicles of Darkness, your virtue and your vice is exactly what it sounds like. So virtue is something about your character that makes them feel good about themselves. Now, in older versions of the game, they had it very rigid, and it was the 7 heavenly virtues, 7 deadly sins. And that still can be very useful, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a drunk, gluttony, or, like, it's a very useful system. But me personally, with my players, the heavenly virtues were very hard to grasp for some reason. Like,
there just wasn't much room for us to use them, sadly.
But in the new system, you kind of pick a buzzword with your storyteller. So let's say what's something you really like about yourself? What's something that when you do it, it makes you feel like a good person?
Being open-minded.
Okay. So accepting others. So you might put open-mindedness as your virtue. Now, what is a vice that when you do it, it makes you feel like you can get through another day?
That's related to the virtue? No. I'm sorry. Say that again.
It's just, what is a vice that, like, for most people, it might be like having a beer after work, or like breaking a TV, or like something that you shouldn't do.
Going for a walk.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Something you shouldn't do.
Yeah, something you shouldn't do.
I mean, binge watching 8 hours of a show I've already seen a million times, maybe.
So, like, you might put, like, obsessive down. You know what I mean? Like, where you could get wrapped up in a task. So, what these things represent is, on a base level, when you do your virtue or your vice, without really hurting anyone else or without really affecting the world around you, but you still give into those situations, you get 1 willpower back. You restore a willpower. Now, if you give into your virtue or you give into your vice, well, I don't want to say give into your virtue, but if you do something in line with your virtue that might cause harm or interrupt your life or cause a problem for someone else, then you get all of your willpower back. Same with your vice. So, like, a really easy one to understand with vice is like drinking, right? So, like, alcoholism is a good vice for people to understand in their day-to-day life. Like, 1 willpower back would go home, like, you just got back from killing a vampire, you pop open a beer, you have 1 or 2 beers, and you go to bed. Like, you gave in to that thing that makes you able to face the next day, but it didn't really hurt anyone, so it's only a little bit. Now, but if when you go to fight the vampire, you show up 3 whiskeys to the wind, and you're like, you've potentially endangered your allies and yourself because you had to give in to your vice, that would give you all your willpower back.
Oh.
So, yes.
So the badder you act,
if it causes harm or you know what I mean? So it's...
So because you're paying for it, essentially.
Yeah. Like, anytime...
Your group is paying for it.
Mm-hmm. And the same with virtue, though. So, like for example, with your virtue being open-minded, like, being open-minded of the big bad. You know what I mean? Like, he's trying to kill everybody in New York. This guy's trying to kill everybody in New York, but maybe we should listen to his side of the story.
Sure.
That's you being open-minded. It makes you feel good about yourself, but it also causes a rift between you and your teammates who don't want to listen to this guy. You know what I mean?
Or
but
someone could get hurt because we tried to listen.
Because you wanted to stop them, the bad guy might be just stalling for time, and harm might come to somebody. But because you caused that risk to do what you thought was right, you still get all of your willpower back.
Okay. Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was the same in that way for virtues.
Well,
too.
you've been playing for a very long time in World of Darkness, and so it has changed over the years.
Sure.
So, because it used to be virtue, you get 1 back, vice, you get all of them back, but it used to be a little bit more cut and dry. But the new system, I feel like, is much more realistic because you can, like, say, oh yeah, I'm cool with black people for, like, open-mindedness, but that doesn't really affect anybody's lives. It just makes you feel good about yourself. So it's a little reward. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Any final words on diving
everything?
in? I mean, we went over everything that
I mean,
had written down.
It's an intro, and we're not doing like a...
We're not even doing the other races. We're doing just humans.
Well,
those poor, weak, feeble humans.
I guess closing thoughts would be, you know, the World of Darkness system is very polarized in the community because, you know, like Jake, who just recently joined, if you're not watching the stream, he's in it eventually. Just keep going.
But not in this eventually.
No.
But eventually.
A different eventually. Man, that title's not going to get weird. But anyway, Jake, when he was coming to our stream, I had told him Chronicles of Darkness. He talked to a couple of his friends, and we were like, "Oh no, that game's not good."
Oh.
You know, like, and you, who's played in all three, I mean, you've told me in the past that World of Darkness is probably your favorite.
I mean, and it's one of our longest games we've ever had.
Yeah, we had a 2-year zoo game back in New World of Darkness. But so, like, there's a lot of stigma around it, and I really wish people would step away and realize Chronicles of Darkness isn't just vampire. It's not just, you know, standing around in gothic clothing pretending to drink blood from humans. It's a very complex, deep system. The lore goes on for days. Like, the lore is really in depth. Every single ability has flavor text to it. Every single like group or creature you can be, they've written whole books about it. There's novels. It's just this beautiful system that relates to our world with just a few differences, and it's simple. It's easy to pick up. You can really turn it into anything. Like we've played a homebrew Star Wars that uses the World of Darkness system. You know, because anything where you're just a normal princess. She was a princess. But any time that, you know, you want to do a modern game set in a modern world where the rules make sense to a modern world, I would say Chronicles of Darkness at its base level, what we're talking about right now, is the perfect fit.
Awesome. All right, well, hopefully we will be making more of these videos to really, really dive into this complex system. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Follow us and punch that like button, right? Mighty MM Cast.
Yeah. Well, if you found this show, you're probably already on our YouTube page.
Probably.
But
thank you so much.
Follow us on social media. Look into our Patreon content, which we will eventually have. I don't know if we do it this time. But no, I'm getting no. But we just will.
Came from there.
We will, and also just follow us on Patreon because you like us. That would be really nice too. Mom, follow me on Patreon.
I'm really disappointed in a lot of my friends and family that they don't seem to be able to just, hey, follow me. Come on. Yeah, takes 2 seconds.
I know, right? I tell people all the time, you don't even have to sign up for Twitch. Just follow me on Twitch. You know what I mean? Like, you don't ever have to watch me. Just subscribe.
Yeah. Sign in one time.
But anyway, so we're going to be doing these videos, you know, like when we talk about other systems on Eventuality, we'll have different people on, but it'll always be us. And sadly, poor Cooper got hungry, and that was what that was earlier, and he didn't get to sit with me the entire time. But
actually, I don't think he was with you at all.
He was at the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
And then they got up and they started barking because they wanted to be fed.
Because right away he was like, I was sitting here for an hour, but now I need to get up.
Our cruel taskmaster who made me change my shirt took him away and locked him in a tower. But yeah, so this was Eventuality, and no, not Eventuality. This was Eventually, and I guess we'll come up with a tagline.
In the eventual, what was the other word? In the Eventuality.
That's all, folks. That's all.